Hey y'all, so welcome to the channel. What I wanted to do is bring back a old favorite, which is called Around the Coffee Table. I'm getting back into my reading phase. I'm not sure if you remember, and I mean, I've talked to a few people about this, but sometimes we go into like this phase where like we just hyper focus on books, hyper focus on, one particular thing. We kind of just rotate them. So for me right now, I'm hyper focusing on books mostly because I have, like, honestly, I just decided to go to the library. I just decided to try to log into my old library account and then just go because I think I might have briefly talked about focusing on things that I enjoyed doing as a child. And as a child, I enjoyed going to the library, to the detriment of my parents because it always fell to them to take me to the library. It was, even though it was like less than 5 minutes away from the house. But anyways, now I can take myself, and with technology, the Houston Public Library has this app where I can place books on hold, and where they come from whichever location they're coming from, and then they get placed on hold for me, and I can just go pick them up. But so that's also a cool thing. But yeah, so without further ado, I will open this video up to say, at the start of this, I was very kind of like not really keeping my hopes up too high, because for me, I had just written the entire, collection from Liane Moriarty, which is my favorite Australian author. Well, no, just my favorite author. I don't know why I say Australian. She is Australian, but she's not my favorite in the Australian category. She's just happens to be Australian. And so because I was done reading all them, I'm like, all of her books, I was like, well, crap, like, am I ever going to find a good book ever again that titillates me? And naively, I thought this. Without really sitting down and thinking about the thousands, millions, billions of books in the world. So I went to Reddit. Basically, I Googled those like books like Liane Moriarty, and a few of them popped up. So that's where I started my journey on finding other authors. And in my journey, I found one, Sally Hepburn, which is the one that I'll start out with. So I'm not reviewing her as an author, but slowly I'm starting to see, like, what the jazz is about her, because she's really, really good. So I'm not very good on the fly, so I wrote down my thoughts in my tone of voice about one of the books from her called The Good Sister, and these are my thoughts. So it's almost like a trend now that when I first dive into a book, I don't click with the characters. I'm not sure if a lot of people do, but they all seem to do or think in a way that I find annoying, but I'm pretty sure that has to do with my awful tendency to make quick judgments, which I'm happy to report is something that I'm working on this year. Anyway, the story centers around these twin sisters, Fern and Rose, who had a less than average upbringing. Each sister remembers the events of the past in a vastly different light, which is apparent as the story goes back and forth from Fern's point of view and Rose's diary. So Fern is a librarian who is extremely sensitive to loud noises, bright lights, and smells. She is easily overwhelmed with crowds and thrives on strict routines. Fern is very close to Rose, her sister, who she talks to every day and has dinner with 3 times a week. Red flag. I don't even have dinner with my sister that often. I can't remember the last time I had dinner with my sister. As I read the book, it's very clear that both sisters feel very strongly for each other and have a sort of codependent relationship that they are comfortable, both of them, comfortable existing in. I read the summary of this book and I thought it was going to be a feel-good story about sisters being supportive of each other and finding love, like, in their own lives. I'm glad that it turned out to be much more layered than that, because what I'm finding out about myself is that I like chaos in my books. What really stands out to me is the level of detail that Fern's character is fleshed out in, the way her thoughts are constructed. She doesn't relate to social norms, but she finds them confusing as she takes the world very literally and at face value. Couple that with her very pointed reactions to her overstimulation, her life seems a very difficult and unique one to live. I admire when authors write someone at I admire when authors write someone that isn't just your average Joe with relatable qualities. At first, I raised my eyebrows at Fern's character because of like her inner dialogue, but I think I just needed time with her to understand her impairments and to empathize with her. I also like the details of how the world reacts to her. I imagine I would find this sort of person aloof or rude, but it's a reminder to empathize with strangers is key because you never know what they're going through. This is my first Hepworth book, and I recognize her genius already, and I plan to read more of her books. I give her a 4 out of 5. So I don't give her a 4 out of 5. I gave this book a 4 out of 5. So yeah, this book made me. I'm glad this is the first book that I picked up after reading Moriarty's all of her books, because it like gave me hope. I was like, yes, like there are authors that can, like take my mind on a loop, but like in this genre, right? I should talk about this other book. I think it's called The Wife Upstairs by Freida McFaddon. I'm not going to review her book, but I will say that one left me. That one also had characters in the beginning that I didn't really empathize with, and I think a lot of it was because it was the mindset of someone younger, and I kind of just had to like try to understand, like always keep in the front of mind that okay, her upbringing was because of this, and so because of this you have to understand, or I have to understand, that there are some things that to her she reacts to flippantly because of it, and other things that she places her importance in other things that one wouldn't usually, depending on your walk of life, and so I appreciated that in that book. It really gave you her background, because it's like, oh, okay, now I get why she thinks this way, and so on. But so that book is a psychological thriller, and the further you go down this rabbit hole, like I personally ended up, it's a human nature to assume how a book is going to end, and then be wrong, and then you're like, okay, so this is how this book is. And then you're wrong again. So you're, even towards the very end, that's one of the things that really like stuck with me, is that book in particular. Even to the very end, it was surprise after surprise, and you were always wrong about what was going on. So shout out to that book. I love that book. But I'll go on to the next book that I'm going to read, which is Never Have I Ever by Joshilyn Jackson. I'm going to start this out with, if you love, like, or were slightly entertained enough by this book to feel defense about it, if I don't favor this book, please skip forward. Disclaimer out of the way, I did not enjoy this book. It started out very strange, as this uninvited stranger, Angelica Rue, forces her way, using her charms, to join a book club meeting hosted by the main character, Amy Way. She basically uses this OP charm to get everyone to forget about the book that they're discussing that week and drink as though these 40-something-year-old women were teenagers again. So like she just convinced them all, hey, let's do shots. She just literally came in, right? This book club was like, hey, let's forget about the book that we're discussing that you guys probably normally always do. I don't know how she can, like, again, maybe it's me being naive, but I'm at an age where I can't drink like that. I can't drink like that. My body doesn't metabolize alcohol that well, and I've had enough hangovers to learn my lesson that I can't drink the way I used to. So, and through my conversations with other people that are around my age, even a few years younger and older, have the same sentiment. So that's where I'm basing my experience, okay? So she uses her OP term to get all these 40-something-year-old strangers that she also has never met, and convinces them to all drink like there's no tomorrow. right? Like they're 18 and trying to sneak up. Like they're putting this stuff away as if someone's going to take it away from them. It's all very strange. And somehow, like from the get, I'm supposed to buy this, you know? Anyway, after getting everybody drunk, but Amy and her BFF Charlotte, because she's pregnant, drunk Angelica proceeds, and she's just pretending to be drunk. Angelica proceeds to somehow get everyone to spill their guts about the worst things with a game called Never Have I Ever. So if you've never done said thing, then you drink, and if you did do the thing, then you don't drink. So that's how she's like pulling. And again, like I'm just supposed to buy this, that, you know, this group of strangers are supposed to, because I would say, okay, I guess it's easier to talk to strangers about these things, but this is a group of ladies who live around each other, and it's not just strangers. Like they are in a room with their neighbors who they frequently hang out with. They know each other's families and their histories and stuff like that. So again, I'm just like, I'm just supposed to buy this, you know? So this alarms Amy because Angelica, you know, the OP charmer, insinuates that she knows Amy's deepest, darkest secret. And instead of being annoyed at the intrusion and the assumption by this rando, she starts shaking in her boots, like acting like she's guilty, you know? So Amy makes a huge mistake and says her big secret out loud to Angelica after she characteristically charms her way into her house yet again the following week. This turns into an elaborate game of poker without cards. It's all very strange because there are times when Amy gets the upper hand in this blackmail situation, but like she gets the upper hand with Angelica, but never uses it to her favor. So like in an effective way. Angelica is always besting her at every turn, and it all just seems so far-fetched, you know? But not only that, at the beginning when I saw where this was going, my heart started racing, like, oh, you know, like when you're watching an action movie, but then, you know, the movie decides to character build in between action scenes, so it slows down, you know what I mean? It could work in a movie, but it doesn't exactly work in a book. I think a book or a movie is like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, so there's only so much you can do. So if you do it in a book, you can execute great, or you can drag it on, and the book just loses its momentum, and in turn, because of it, like I start to lose interest. So I found myself skimming through this book, honestly, just to get to the dialogue. And I only do this with books that I'm really not into. I give this book a 2 out of 5, not just because of the storyline, but because of the writing. The writing felt really clunky in the beginning. It felt very like emo, in a way that felt like it was a teenager writing poetry, using a lot of unnecessary metaphors and symbolism, which felt out of place when you're trying to get the reader to get a feel for your main character and the setting. So no, actually it's a 1 star for me, because the writing, then it was just also frustrating. To this day, I can't think of a book that frustrated me more than this book. Like I had an awful time reading this book. I just didn't like it. But if you liked it, good for you. We clearly have, you know, different tastes, and that's okay. So the last book that I will touch on, and, you know, for future videos, I'm gonna have the books in my hand so you know what I'm talking about. It's nice. So the next book is Her Mother's Shadow by Diane Chamberlain. The beginning of this book was very promising because of the way it started out. It was a grisly scene that to me was very, let's rip the band-aid off and just go in full hog, you know? So after for the first chapter though, it got really, really bland. The story centers around Lacey, whose mother was murdered right in front of her when she was a child. So she grows up learning that her mother was not the saint that she and other people in her family thought. Basically, her mom slept around, and her father was not her biological father, but eventually developed a relationship with her real father. Anyway, out of left field, we find Lacey was really good friends with someone who moved to Phoenix, but she hardly visited. It was really strange because the beginning of the book was very, and it, you know, it made sense at the beginning. Like, it was really focusing on, you know, her grappling with the idea that her mother was not who she thought she was. Her mother was flawed, you know, human. I mean, I'm not saying everybody cheats, but like humans do cheat. But she was really grappling with that. And you know, we're hyper focusing on this detail, right? And out of nowhere it's like, oh, I got a call from my very best friend, and you know, I love her and this and that. And it's like, okay, but why didn't we hear about her like for the first few chapters? So anyways, I thought that was a little strange. So this friend ends up dying and leaving her only daughter, Mackenzie, in her care. Sorry, there's like cat hair. Everyone is really confused by this, including Lacey, because Lacey was hardly in Mackenzie's life or her friend's life once she moved to Phoenix. And like, Lacey hardly ever called her. You know, this is in a time when phones existed, cell phones existed. So even though they were really good friends growing up, they were disconnected, essentially. That's what the gist was. But it's like, I don't know, it felt weird. But Mackenzie had a grandmother, and instead of leaving Mackenzie to the grandmother, Mackenzie was left to Lacey. So Lacey had to go get her because she lived in Phoenix, and it was a completely different state from where they live, which is miles away in a place called Kiss River. So to touch back on what Lacey's focus is on, the recurring theme is that Lacey basically in her mind is always slut shaming her own mother and desperately trying to be the opposite of her. So Lacey didn't find out about her mom's frequent infidelities with other men until she was older. By that time, Lacey was, let's say, exploring her sexuality. And as soon as she found out that her mom was kind of sort of the same, she immediately stopped. She was like, okay, like, I'm not going to be sleeping around because of something that my mom did, and I don't want to be like her. Which was interesting because when she initially started doing that, she started, you know, her focus was to be kind, to be like her mother. And then she found out her mother wasn't who she was, and then started sleeping around and was like, no, I shouldn't do that. I don't know, it was very confusing. So at the time, people compared her to being kind and forgiving like her mother. She tried, and then in that moment decided to be more callous and held grudges. So it's kind of like the tides were always turning depending on who said what. Like if it was, oh, like your mother, and she'd be like, okay, she's like 180 and change your behavior. So these topics were constant, redundant, and boring. A lot of the book is Lacey's inner monologue of like mother hating, self-criticizing, and having a fear of being close to men. There were a lot of characters that didn't seem really relevant to Lacey's dad. There was a lot of characters that didn't really seem relevant, like Lacey's dad and his wife, which I find strange because he was the one that was raising her and not the biological father. I feel like the biological father was more in the story than the actual father who raised her. So I didn't get attached to like literally any of these characters because they were all either bland or grating. There was no in between. It was one or the other for me. So I give this book a 2 out of 5. It didn't frustrate me as much as Never Have I Ever. Never Have I Ever by Joshilyn Jackson. But that's it. Like, I give it a 2 because it didn't annoy me as much as that one. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed these reviews of these 3 books. I think depending on the size of the book, the next review video might end up being shorter. Right now I'm reading Midnight Sun because I'd never read Midnight Sun, and from what I understand, it was released 4 years ago, and where was I? But anyways, So I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you on the next one. And until then, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Okay? Bye.